Hi everybody, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to do a professional walkthrough of real estate. Let me show you the video and then I'll tell you how it's made. Okay, there are 0 bonus points for guessing which time of the year I filmed this video, but I have actually been capturing content of this building for the last year in all of the seasons. So if you're watching that video and you're thinking, well, some of it looked a bit like winter and then there were spring flowers and everything, that's the reason why. Now, before we delve into the gear and the techniques, you need to consider the structure of your video first. I tend to start off with a wide establishing shot. This might be shot on a drone, but it helps the viewer understand the building and its setting. It's difficult to appreciate how nestled into the South Downs this building is until you send up the drone. Now, if you're considering starting the video with some text, that's probably going to be the property name or the property location, then consider having an object in the foreground using a shallow depth of field and therefore blurring the background. So the building could be in the background and then you'll have some nice negative space and then you can just put the text for the name of the building. Alternatively, if there is a plaque for the building, the name of it might be on the front door, on the wall, on the fence or on the gate, then I would include that. So now you've got this establishing shot. People know roughly where the building is and you've probably shown them the front door. Now you need to take them on this journey. Forget the fact that you're making a video. Pretend that you're holding somebody's hand and you're walking them through this property. This is the beginning of the journey. This is the front door to the grain store. You can see the Christmas tree in there, bit of intrigue, what's going to go on here, and then you're into the lobby. As you come in, you've got utility space, and this is kind of the porch area where you take your shoes and your wellies off, make this look presentable. You can see here, these are the robes for the hot tub that's outside. If you've got a property with a hot tub, then you're probably going to want to get some images of the hot tub and people using it ideally. So you come through here and then you're into the main space itself. So you can see some of my camera gear scattered around. Obviously you need to tidy up as you go, but you've got a large kitchen with an island, and then you've got open plan living, dining table, and then this is a mezzanine space. So you can see all the way up there. Every single time I've been to this property, I've spent the majority of my time in this room. You can see it's got a lot going for it, double height space, kitchen, living, dining. There's a lot here to make content with. But of course you can't just have the kitchen, living, dining space. You've got to include the bedrooms, bathrooms and en suites. So as I transition from the living space, I come through here and you've got one of the bedrooms here. There's another bedroom through here, and then you've got the main bathroom in here. Up here there's another bathroom. You've got cozy kind of lounging area with some beanbags here. Secondary living space, which then leads out onto the balcony. And then you've got a twin room at the end of the corridor here. Don't forget to capture important details. So this is being shot on a wide angle lens, but I would typically use a 50mm or above to capture some of the details. So this is a bespoke map of Lewes because that's where the grain store is located. You can see that this table is bespoke. You can see this is like raw materials. It's details like this that will add to the video. So don't shoot everything really wide. You need to make sure that you capture some of the details as well. Now, if you do have a drone, the perfect way of ending a video is literally just to fly a drone backwards away from the property, kind of just signifying, okay, we're leaving the property now. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Alternatively, if you are photographing the property at night, then you could do a time lapse of the building. The sky will be getting darker and darker, and then you could just gradually fade to black. Let's talk about gear. Okay, and wide angle lens. I think that's it. Now, I have got with me 2 cameras, and you don't need to have 2 cameras, but like I said earlier, I've been documenting this building over the various seasons, and therefore I thought I'd show you the 2 cameras that I have been using. But ideally you wouldn't mix brands and you don't need 2 cameras. So on my left I've got the Zhuyin Crane M3 with the Canon R8 and the 16mm. This is a very small full frame setup. The specifications of this tiny little camera are quite impressive though. So even though this is a bigger setup, the Canon R8 is able to shoot in 4K at 50 frames per second without a crop. So therefore you can do half speed when you're editing the video, which is beneficial. Now on my right, on your left, I've got the Zhuyin Weebill 3S, which is quite a bit larger and it's a stronger gimbal all round. On top of the gimbal, I've got a Sony A7 IV with a 20 to 70mm lens. Now this is not the perfect lens for shooting interiors. Typically you want a wide angle lens, so I was pairing it also with the Sigma 16 to 28mm. That's an F2.8, but I wasn't shooting at 2.8, probably around F5.6. Let's just say you don't have any gear and you're wondering which gear you should get. I would say you probably get very similar results with both of these setups, but when you get the slightly bigger gimbals, you get stronger motors and generally smoother performance. The Weebill 3 has a combo kit. It's an extra that you can buy, and it's got a wrist support and it's got a secondary arm here. So you're not just holding it with one hand. This, although you can hold it with 2 hands, you can hold it, the tripod kind of folds up into a second handle. You're always kind of cantilevering it away from your body, and therefore your arms start to hurt, your shoulders, and then that kind of moves onto your back. So if you're using this for a long period of time, that's going to start to ache after a while. And even though this is heavier and bigger, because you've got multiple points of contact, and if this was to be on, you can also kind of do it in underslung mode. So this is ergonomically much nicer to use, but it's bigger. Now, of course, there are unlimited combinations of different cameras and different lenses. I'll just give you the highlights and then you can just pick and choose which ones are right for you. But ideally, I would go for a full frame camera. You can go for a crop sensor camera or whatever you prefer. But you should be getting a camera that shoots in 4K, ideally with the option of slow motion. 50 frames per second is the sweet spot. If you go any slower than that, say 100 or 120 frames per second, then the video footage becomes a bit boring to watch. So 50 frames per second, which is half speed when you play it back. And that gives you the option to do speed ramping, so you can kind of quickly go through a room, whip around a corner, and then slow the video down to 50%. That's going to give you a nice natural looking result. Anything slower than that gets a bit boring. Ideally, you get something that shoots in 10-bit because that's going to hold the grade together a lot better. If you're grading your footage and you're shooting in a log profile, shooting in 10-bit is significantly better to work with. So the Canon R8, that shoots in log. This, the A7 IV shoots in log, but so does the DJI Pocket 3, that shoots in log as well. So that DJI Pocket 3 has the ability to shoot at 120 frames per second in 4K. So I actually made a separate video about that. I'll put that at the end of this video. In terms of specs, the Pocket 3 is outrageous. It's better than this in terms of just specifications alone for video. And regardless of however good your camera and lens combination is at focusing, switch your lens to manual focus. When you're making real estate videos, you do not want your camera hunting back and forwards trying to find focus. Focus on something a few meters away from you. If you're using a wide angle lens at a medium aperture, most things are going to be acceptably in focus anyway. As well as that, I can see in the screen over there, I've got this camera set to auto white balance. And because this Christmas tree here is very orange, it's immediately turning this white wall to blue. When you're making real estate videos, you need to make sure that you are setting a white balance. It needs to be fixed. Pick the most appropriate Kelvin setting for your environment and leave it at that, so that when you come to edit all of these video files together, there's some consistency in the white balance.
As you saw from my videos at the beginning, there are a lot of camera movements involved in real estate walkthroughs. I've already discussed using a gimbal, which will get you the vast majority of the motion that you need, but there are some other tools you might want to consider. The most basic is the time-lapse function, which is built into most cameras nowadays. The camera can be static, but movement of people, water, or clouds create the interest and the energy in the scene. If you have a gimbal, then check to see whether or not it offers programmable paths. This will allow the camera to follow a preset path over a long period of time, say 10 minutes, which can be combined with a time-lapse for added interest. If you're outputting your project at a lower resolution, for example Full HD, and you're filming in 4K, then you can digitally crop and pan in post to generate artificial camera movement. Drones are an easy way to create camera movements, however I personally wouldn't fly one through somebody's house. Although you could use the drone's built-in camera and gimbal handheld if you absolutely had to. I exclusively use my drone for external establishing shots and interesting top-down views when it comes to real estate videos. Another option for your camera movements is using a tripod with a fluid head. This will allow you to create slow, smooth pans, perfect for looking around a scene. A fluid head will also allow tilt movements, ideal for revealing high ceilings and mezzanines, or suggestive of movement from one floor to the next in your video sequence. A sturdy tripod and fluid head is the best way of carrying a heavy camera setup. You don't need to worry about balancing it on a gimbal or the burden of having to carry the weight of the camera on your back. When I first started creating property videos, I was in search of the best way to avoid the bounce that you get when you walk with a gimbal. This is known as the Z-axis movement, or up and down to you and I. All handheld gimbals on the market suffer from this, and you have to get creative to overcome this. At the beginning, I used to take a fold-up bike in the boot of my car, which would allow me to cycle around the house of the property, holding the gimbal with one hand and the handlebars with the other. Here is an example of that method in action when I made a video about a Nissan GT-R. This removed the up and down movement entirely, but I wouldn't entertain cycling through a client's house. For the interiors, I use a fold-up skateboard, but you could use a regular skateboard or a penny board if you wanted to keep the setup small. Here is an example of a commercial shoot that I did for Concord 2, a listed building and a notorious live music venue on Brighton seafront. In order to create smooth footage, I simply skateboarded through the empty venue, cutting out the shaky footage where I was kicking to get the skateboard moving. Obviously, I don't recommend this if your client has got an expensive floor and you're at risk of scratching it. If you're really confident in your abilities and you have some disposable cash, then you could consider investing in a one wheel. If you've seen one of these before, then they're kind of like a Segway, but it's got one wheel and you ride it sideways like a skateboard. They're quite challenging at first, but once you get the hang of it, they are a fantastic tool for filmmaking. And you still have two hands free to hold a camera, and there's no remote. The one wheel is controlled entirely by balance and distributing your body weight. It is a really helpful tool for making large sweeping camera movements, but again, you need to be careful that you don't scuff the floor or bump into anything expensive. I would only start filming on a one wheel when I'm absolutely confident on it and I can concentrate on the filming itself. The final piece of kit that I would consider is a slider. The most basic slider will be manual and it won't slide very far, and you will struggle to get great results. I would not recommend getting a cheap one. If you invest in a manual slider that you can upgrade, then this gives you options. I purchased a Canova slider many years ago, and that allowed me to upgrade originally with a weighted resistant attachment for smooth video, and eventually I coughed up for the motor to create repeatable camera movements. A slider is the best way to create complex, repeated movements again and again. I don't own a sophisticated one, but my advice would be to get one that is around 80 centimeters or longer to be effective for real estate video. If you have loads of money or you can justify it, then look into the Edelkrone ecosystem, as they have everything. The secret to making slider shots work is to have an object close to the camera, which in turn will emphasize the movement. If there's nothing in the foreground, then you won't even know that the camera is moving. Take into account that most sliders are around 30 to 50 centimeters long, which is nothing compared to the movement that you'll get with a gimbal, which can be the width of the room. However, the sense of movement can be controlled by the choice of focal length, foreground objects and the distance to your focal point, so make sure that you experiment.
Now, what the problem you may come across is, do you think you've had a wonderful video shoot and you get all of these video clips back into your editor? I use Final Cut and I use Adobe Premiere Pro, and what you just kind of import is a selection of movements. You might have been kind of doing the dolly backwards and forwards, and then you're doing some left and some rights, and you're doing some tilting up and tilting down, and then you've got to figure out how am I going to put all of this video together? My last point on camera movement is about consistency. Now, if you're making a video of the kitchen, panning left to right, you can't then edit that with a video from the living room, panning from right to left. You can't put those two video clips side by side. It's disturbing to watch. So what I tend to do is, if I'm filming inside the kitchen, I do a pan left to right, a pan right to left, and then I do a dolly in and a dolly out, and then I've got 4 video clips to use, and I can kind of edit them together afterwards however I like. Ideally, you've got a complete shot list and you're literally just ticking off stuff as you go, and then you don't have to kind of duplicate images. And when you're editing this video, if you get stuck where you've got a left to right pan and then you don't have any other left to right pans, then you need to break up that movement with a static shot or a time lapse or something slowly moving, so that it then breaks that movement and kind of resets the movement. And then you can go right to left, but you can't have these opposite movements next to one another. Now, if you can avoid fast moving pans, there's a reason why they don't do it in the movies. Now, if you watch Grand Designs, you'll see that the camera work very, very slowly moving around the building, the interiors, the exterior. And the reason that they don't do this is because of something called rolling shutter. Technically, the sensor on your camera reads from the top left to the bottom right, and therefore it's doing this. If you move your camera whilst it's reading the sensor, then anything that is actually vertical in the image gets distorted. There are some rules of thumb, but generally just stick to very, very slow pans or quick pans. A quick pan will disguise the movement in a quick blur and you'll get away with it. Alternatively, you could be shooting in slow motion and then it will become a slow motion pan because of the relative speed. But otherwise, avoid medium speed pans. And as you can probably tell from the Christmas tree in the background, filming real estate in the winter is difficult because you've got very limited daylight hours. Obviously, in the summer, you've got the opposite problem. You've got too much daylight. To photograph or video a building at sunrise, you're going to be getting up very, very early. Without introducing loads of studio lights and everything, most properties you're going to be relying upon natural light. Then I take all of these video clips, bring them into my video editor, and I start to cut them up, generally at the tempo of my chosen soundtrack. I might add a little bit of sound design, purely because I'm not recording any audio at the time of filming. And if you follow all of these tips, you should end up with something that looks like this. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this video and maybe you learned something. If you have any questions, then let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to learn more about photographing architecture, I'd recommend watching this video next. Thanks for watching. See you next time.